Hello and welcome to our first artist talk in support of our current exhibition, A Conversation Through Time and Space. Today we currently have three of our 9 CoCA member artists joining us today to discuss both their work, their artistic practice, and the exhibition as a whole. Mikhail Siskoff, Ellen Hochberg, and Jennifer Molina, thank you all so much for being here. This exhibition features work from the late Selma Waldman, who was an enigmatic, graphic, activist artist who, while she grew up in Texas, she did end up and bounced all over the world for a little bit. She did end up settling in the Seattle arts community for the mid to later years of her career. We have been given her work to exhibit by the generosity of her son, Reiner Waldman Adkins, who has also been participating in a great help for this exhibition. And we wouldn't be able to do it without him, without our participating member artists, who we are all, as always, so grateful for. So we're going to kick off this event with Mikhail Siskoff, who's going to tell us a little bit about his work, his artistic practice, how he feels about his work in the exhibition in relation to Miss Waldman's work. So Mikhail, if you would like to start us off, please.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Nat. Thanks for putting this together. It's great to really honored to be a part of this exhibition. I think it's really important and I think very relevant, in relation to the times, that we're living in right now. So really honored to be a part of this. My name is Mikhail Siskoff. I'm a visual artist. I live in Anchorage, Alaska. I am the northernmost member of CoCA. Certainly not the farthest away, because Anchorage really isn't that far. But I am the northernmost member. I grew up in a town called Chugiak, Alaska, which is about 30 minutes outside of Anchorage. Child of the 80s, so. We didn't have cable TV or anything out in that area. We did have a big, stack of National Geographics, and we had a thrift store at the end of the road. And I think that's kind of where some of my affinity for what would later become my source material would come from. I moved to Anchorage in the early 2000s. Really started getting into visual arts with photography. I inherited my dad's old 35 millimeter and started working with that, and then kind of started playing with some image manipulation. And actually, it was around 2015 that I really started to see collage as an artistic medium. There had been a lot of artists, working with collage, in the past, but my experience with it was very limited. When I thought of collage before, I would think of, my sister's, vision board collages with, bongo jeans and things like that on there, and not really, seeing how it could be a vehicle for, some powerful imagery. So I started doing, some digital collage work initially at first, and nothing too, I wouldn't say anything too fancy, with Photoshop and After Effects and things like that. Really just some simple copying and pasting, and then really started getting more into the analog work. So X-Acto knife, pair of scissors, rubber cement, and just copying and pasting and manipulating paper images that way. Behind me is some of my source material. It's a part of a collection of vintage magazines that I've sourced from thrift stores and Craigslist and garage sales and things like that. It looks like a lot. I do manage to remember where a lot of things are in there, and I work. I try and stay consistent, with an era, but I also use it sounds more organized than it really is, but I do use a system of binders, and I copy and I cut out a lot of pieces that I think could be useful in the future, and that way when I'm working on a piece, sometimes I'll start one and I won't finish it for another 6 months or so, and maybe I'll find the right piece or remember exactly where something was that I think would be particularly useful for that. I still consider myself an emerging artist. I actually had my first solo show at a downtown gallery here in Anchorage called IGCA in 2019. It was called Dollar Cinema. It was inspired by the exploitation films of the 70s, sometimes called grindhouse films. Definitely outside of the comfort zone, I think, of a lot of art patrons in Anchorage, because we still kind of seem to hold on to Alaskana a bit here. We do have a fairly strong contemporary art scene and some really supportive people here, but I do find that kind of breaking out of that realm is definitely limiting, as far as potential spaces to exhibit and things like that. I did a group show shortly after that in Wenatchee. Actually, it was an international collage show called Copyright Bandits. I got to meet a lot of collage artists that I had known for a few years and make some really great connections there. And I joined CoCA in March of 2020. So right before the pandemic hit, I'd hoped to make quite a few more trips down there and visit the gallery. I'd really love to be talking in front of all of you and meeting you all face to face and talking about our work there. That would have been ideal, but this is great too. So my piece in this show is called Foreign Investment. It's an analog hand-cut collage from vintage magazines. My narrative focuses on what I call complicit corporations. So when I'm going through this source material and I'm cutting these things out, I do read a lot of the articles, and sometimes I just kind of hang out down here and read some of these articles because it's interesting, the historic perspective on these things. But one thing I really noticed while going through these here is the what I would say the audacity of some of the advertisers in the magazines, because in some cases and actually very many cases, the companies that are advertising in these issues are the ones that are either directly or indirectly responsible for the environmental catastrophes, political violence, and other types of issues that are featured in there. And they're large multinational companies like Anglo American, which owns De Beers, Union Carbide, the companies which later became BP, Anglo-Persian, Anglo-Iranian oil companies. So there's a lot of relation there too, and it's almost just barely beneath the scenes when you're reading it. And so I thought that was particularly relevant, to this exhibition and to Selma Waldman's work, just because they're oppressors, so to speak, and yeah, that's pretty much the summation of that piece.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for sharing. And I have just a couple of questions for you. I was doing a little bit of snooping through your webpage, and I noticed that the vast majority of your collage and didactic themes draw exclusively from vintage ads. And I was just wondering, what do you think that like the more vintage era of ads convey that more modern ads don't?
Sure. Yeah, I've definitely worked with both, but I've always been drawn to the vintage aesthetic, but not just the fashion and styling. I think something about the hues and the tones of the image is really appealing to me. But one thing else that is really unique to that era of advertising is they're definitely bolder, and not always in a good way. Some of them were irreverent at best, and at their worst, just generally offensive. And I think, depending on the work that you're trying to do, I mean, if you're, you know, I guess they work in a number of ways, but when you're focusing on, more heavy hitting type of issues, I find that they definitely lend themselves to doing that. Dollar Cinema drew really heavily on those themes because they were very closely connected.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then, after reviewing your written statement for this exhibition, you made a point to say that art that sells and art that makes a statement are often at odds with each other. That you can make a lot of art that's sellable, but it might not hold as true to your your core or your what you find to be something that really needs to be spoken about. I was just wondering, like, if you had any ideas why this is the case, that artists are often forced into a position of having to choose between, making money, making a living, which, we all have to do, and really making a statement with their art.
I think it's particularly relevant in the times of COVID, with a lot of gallery closures and access to patrons being very limited. I guess it's kind of it seems almost that you're almost forced to kind of find a balance between purposeful art and art that you make for yourself that satisfies your ambition, but then there's art for everyone else. And I sell a fair amount of prints on print on demand sites and things like that. And I find that a lot of the work that people really enjoy, and people that reach out to me and say, hey, I really love this, are the ones that I know they're good, but they're not the ones that really drive me. They're a lot of my surreal landscape type pieces that, when I put that together, I said to myself, oh, this is nice. People will like this, but it wasn't something that really said like, yes, this is good. This is what I want to make. And I find that the ones that I feel that way about are the ones that that are commercially less successful in that way. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Ellen Hochberg, you're up next. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your artistic practice?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me and for having my work in the show. I really appreciate it. As Mikhail said, that's unfortunate that we're not having as many people actually being able to come into the gallery now because of COVID, but at least you guys have done a great job of creating virtual galleries and stuff like that. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. This kind of dovetails off of what he just said, and that is that when people ask me about my artwork, I always find that question a little hard because I feel like I have two very different kinds of art that I make. One is probably what you would call the more saleable part. It's about nature and patterns within nature. And I love images that are beautiful. I mean, I think it just kind of makes you go, oh, and it makes you feel good. So I look for, like, in my artwork, I'll have things like branching lines. I have a lot of branching lines in my work because I feel like there's that branching pattern that shows up over and over again in nature, whether it's rivers and streams or trees or even the circulatory system. You've got all these branching patterns. I've also gotten really into lately patterns like the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence, because again, you see it a lot in nature. So that's one kind of art that I do. But the other kind that I do is the kind of that just, I love them both, but the other kind is more based on social issues, and that speaks to the saleability or non-saleability, things that have to do with responding to what's going on in the world right now. The other reason I find this question always kind of challenging because I wish I could say something like, I make collage and that's what I do, but I feel like I'm like this kid who can't just do one thing. I do painting, I do sculpture, I do video, I do installations, I do drawings. It's like, I can't just do one thing. It kind of makes me a little crazy, to be honest with you. But I want to talk for a minute about the piece that's in this show, because a piece that I've done some work, a series that I did for a while. It is called Human Family, and basically just to kind of introduce it. Actually, I think you have one picture of it, Nat. It's basically it's a video, and it's basically it's this third one there.
I'm sorry. I clicked the
That's
wrong-
okay. I'm just gonna keep talking while you're working.
There it is. This
Nope,
third one?
third one.
This is the third one.
That's the third. Oh,
It sent in a different.
number 3 in the list is what I meant.
Ah. So this one or
The one that one. Okay. So this particular piece, it has a series of eyes in it, and the eyes will slowly dissolve between each other. And the audio is me reading a poem by Maya Angelou called Human Family. And in the piece, she talks about how they're all over the world. People are different. They kind of see things differently, but we're really all alike. In so many ways. I think the last line is something, we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. This whole series came about in 2015 when Donald Trump announced his presidency, or his bid for the presidency of the United States. And I just heard more and more people just making assumptions about each other, about their politics and their background. And I found that really disturbing. And I also started thinking about how we come to make assumptions about each other. One way we make assumptions is by looking at how a person's dressed. If they're dressed extremely modestly, let's say a woman's wearing a hijab, you're going to make an immediate assumption about her character and so many things about her. If someone is dressed in a different way, you're going to make different assumptions about them. Another way we make a lot of assumptions about people is what their hair looks like. Again, maybe their hair isn't even showing, maybe it's covered. Maybe they have certain hairstyles that you make certain assumptions about. So I thought, what if we could just reduce our fellow human beings to just their eyes? And so I wanted to collect a whole bunch of series of eyes. So I am very fortunate to have a studio in the Tashiro Kaplan building, the same building where CoCA is. And up until last March, I was also fortunate because that studio was open every first Thursday of the month. And when we're open for first Thursday, we get a whole lot of people coming in there. And I thought, I've got a bunch of people coming in. I can take pictures of their eyes. But then I was also thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to get a lot of pushback on this, I bet. There's going to be a bunch of people who are going to say, why do you want to take a picture of my eyes? What are you going to do with that picture of my eyes? Why should I give you a picture of my eyes? And so I had actually printed out all these different flyers to give to people. I had sign-up sheets where they could give me their email address, and I would email them what I did with the eyes. And then the day came, and I'd set up a little camera on a tripod with a light. And can you do that one picture of just the one woman? So I took a picture, and this is kind of what the pictures look like. I said to people as they were walking through our hallway, can I take a picture of your eyes? And I was totally expecting pushback on this, but I was quite honestly shocked. Almost everybody to a person said, as long as it's just a picture of my eyes, which I found so fascinating because I think they're very descriptive of a person's eyes. But the other part that was amazing about this was in the 2 hours I took pictures, I had over 160 pictures of people's eyes. I had people literally lining up for me to take a picture of their eyes. I'd have to adjust my tripod up or down because I had different heights of people, but I had literally people waiting in line. And what I found so fascinating about this was it was like they were giving me a piece of themselves. Then as an artist, I was doing something with it. And then in later months, I actually displayed some of the things I did with it. One of the things was that thing, Human Family, which we just talked about. Can you do the last picture on there too, Nat? The other one was this, and this was a series of little digital photo frames that I had, and I actually selected words for this. I selected words that I felt could be used as either a compliment or an insult, depending on who used them. And they were descriptors of people: Latino, Black, white, white collar, blue collar, Muslim, Catholic, Jew. I used all these different kinds of words and all of these different types of eyes to make us sort of think about the fact of how do we see each other? How do we define each other? Do we do it? I mean, so often you'll hear someone just say the word like conservative, and that's supposed to be the entire context of that person. So anyway, that's the background from where that came from. this is some of the kind of video stuff that I've done, but I've also done a lot of other more sculptural pieces when it comes to my social issue pieces, if you will. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I particularly love this last photo that you showed us, just because, you know.
Can I interrupt really quickly?
Mhm.
The other thing I did that I also found interesting is I live in South Seattle. And every year we have something called the Heritage Festival. I think we didn't have one last year, but and it's a very diverse part of the city. And so what I did one summer is I went up to people and I said, would you write down 3 words that describe yourself? And the words that you saw in that background were never used. The words that were used were words like goofy, caring, I put things off. You know, they were all about their character. And so I found that really interesting, that when people were using to describe themselves, they weren't using the same descriptors that you see in social media and you see all over the place as kind of like weaponizing words to attack other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your point, like those words that you chose that can sometimes be used as an insult, it's very interesting that like when someone's describing themselves, they're from the way they see themselves, they often don't use those words. And also like
Right.
if you're just looking at all of those eyes, but for the most part, you can't connect a lot of those people. You wouldn't know who's the white collar.
Oh, what was really interesting about that was there were eyes where you couldn't really even tell the gender of the person. You couldn't necessarily tell the race of the person, depending. You definitely couldn't tell their religion, right? So I found that really fascinating that when we reduce ourselves to our core of essence of who we are, it made a whole different statement.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, thank you so much for sharing and preparing those pictures for us to look at. And I have a couple of questions for you as well. When I was reading your statement for this exhibition, you know, got to read them all. You touch on the thought that artists are often in the unique position to repair the world by impacting the opinions of others through their work. When we have more access than ever, you know, globalism, the internet, all that kind of good stuff. Why do you think that art remains an integral aspect of connection and understanding?
I think what's really interesting is I think especially if you're talking about social issues, we tend to talk about them. We tend to use words, and those appeal to our head. I think those appeal to our sense of what's logical, what makes sense. I think art has the ability to appeal to your head, yes, to some degree, but also to kind of a more not primordial, but a more like your heart. I want to say more than your words. So one of the pictures that I was also going to ask you to show, speaking of which, in 1972, this black and white picture of a young Vietnamese girl all of a sudden made the newspapers. Can you call that one up for me?
Let's see. Sorry, technical difficulties. Give me just one moment.
No problem.
Do you remember what it was titled?
I don't remember. Wait, I could find it for you.
Is it Napalm Girl?
It's Napalm Girl, yes. This little girl, she's a 9-year-old girl. This is in 1972 in Vietnam. So it's during the height of the Vietnam War. And her village had been napalmed. And in an effort to save herself, she'd had to rip off her clothing to keep from being burned badly. As napalm, I don't know if people know this anymore, but it was a very incendiary thing that would stick to you. So she's running down the road after her village had been attacked. This single image helped change Americans' view of the Vietnam War. And so I think images have this amazing ability to see a 9-year-old girl clearly frightened to death. And it could be argued maybe this isn't art, this is photojournalism. But can you show some of the other pictures that I also included, Nat, if you don't mind? Doesn't matter what order, we can take them in whatever order. But it just made me think about how art has changed perceptions of the world around us. Thank you guys for bearing with us while we're technologically moving along.
Can you see this one? No, it says.
All I can see is the little girl, the black and white.
Stop sharing.
If we can't see them, that's okay too. Oh, here. Okay, this is from obviously the front cover of the New Yorker. This is a piece by Kadir Nelson, and this is an amazing piece, isn't it? Well, here we have George Floyd, but embodied in George Floyd is basically the history of racism towards African Americans in this country, from everyone from Emmett Till to slaves. So to me, this speaks to not just, what is your position on Black Lives Matter, but it's, it again, it appeals to your heart as well as your head in a very powerful way. Can you do another one? Oh my gosh, this man's name is Titus Kefir. I love his work. And I don't know if you can tell, I don't know if you can see my cursor on here or not, but he does these amazing paintings, and this child that's in the painting is literally cut out of the canvas. It's actually negative space on the canvas. And as artists, we always talk about positive and negative space, but he's used that negative, literally negative space to make such an amazingly strong statement. And again, this is a statement that to me just shows the power of what art can do to help impact people's viewpoints. We can just stop it there. I've got a couple other images, but I don't want to use up any more time. So to your question, yes, I think we have an amazing ability to distill it to the humanity of these issues. And I think that's why we need to continue to make this work.
Gotcha. And then also in your statement, you mentioned that your artistic practice focuses on who women are throughout different stages of their lives. My question to you is, what stage do you see yourself in? And, how does that contrast from your earlier artistic career / practice?
Well, it's funny because when I went back to school a little over 10 years ago to get my master's degree, well past my undergraduate degree, because for years I had been a graphic designer and a video graphic artist, and then I'd also taught art for a very long period of time. But another thing had occurred. When I was being raised, I feel like I was raised with this idea that there was a path I was expected to take. And this path started out as a child. You went to school, elementary, middle, high school, you went to college. The expectation was I would work for a while, I would get married, and I'd have children. And in my brain, I always had this analogy of like walking through a forest and you're on the path. And it's very clear where the path is and the way guiding you through the forest. Well, as my children got older and were getting to a point where they were going to move away from home, the image in my brain came to the fact that I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what was going to be next in my life. So the image in my brain was that the path had come to a clearing. And now it's like, oh, shoot, I could go there, or I could go there, I could go, I don't know where to go because I don't have a path anymore. And I've led my whole life by this path. So I went back to school and I got my master's degree. And ironically, I went to NYU for my master's. And when I came back to the Seattle area, it was kind of ironic because when I was at NYU, they gave us this class on the business of art, and they gave people all of these resources for different things you could get involved in. And I remember raising my hand and saying to the professor, excuse me, for those of us not from the Northeast, what would you recommend? And he's like, check out the resources in your area. I was like, damn, you just gave them resources. But I don't know what the resources in my area. So a little over 10 years ago, I come back to Seattle. I didn't know the art scene at all here, and I didn't know where to go, and I'm applying for things and doing things. So I feel like in 10 years, when you say, where are you at? I feel like I'm more knowledgeable about not only the art scene here in Seattle, but like kind of like where I'm at and what I want to make and what I want to do. I still feel a little bit like I'm in that clearing, and I feel like sometimes I go this way and sometimes I go that way, which is kind of nice and also kind of overwhelming at the same time. So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And then we have Jennifer Molina up next, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. It's actually a pleasure. This is my first artist talk ever, so I'm super excited. I've been a part of CoCA since I think 2012 or something around like that. It's since the very beginning. So I actually, it's really nice to, to participate, in the exhibitions, and I miss First Thursdays so much. So, definitely it's nice to be able to come together, even if it's virtually. So as far as like my artistic practice and the piece and the exhibition, I guess you can say that art is how I explore my relationship with the world around me. It's an outlet for my ideas, my energy, and even my frustrations. I use art to reflect on my own past experiences, the present, and even contemplate my future. Over the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to experiment with different types of media, subject matters, and styles before I finally felt comfortable to settle into my own. But I find photography to be my ultimate passion. I'm drawn to photography because through a still frame, we have the power to inspire people to undo their assumptions about the world. Photography is like a universal language if you think about it, right? My work has evolved as I learn and grow from life experiences. Shortly after the country went into upside down due to the results of the election of the president who brought nothing but shame to this country. I felt that I could do more and decided to use my own voice and my privilege to advocate for those who couldn't do it for themselves. I found myself attending rallies and political demonstrations, not only to photograph them, but to show my support and learn about the issues that I truly care about. The piece and the exhibition is a part of an ongoing Black and White photo series that I started as a way to highlight the raw and untold stories of the people around us. I attended the 2017 Women's March to capture the historic moment, and just be in community. And as I was walking around, photographing everything around me, I found my subject, which was the protesters who came together to call for an end of violence and injustice towards Indigenous women. They wanted, justice for Rena Davis, who was murdered on November 3rd, 2016, by police officers who went into her home after her boyfriend called and asked them to give her a wellness check. She was 5 months pregnant, and Rena Davis, didn't have the most stable of childhoods. She and her sisters were in and out of foster care, and through all of that, Renee strived to be there for her sisters. Later reconciling, with her mother, and just making a life for herself. So I decided to name this piece "Stolen Sisters" as a way to honor her. The efforts and the resilience that the people that I meet in these political demonstrations, they inspire me to overcome my own sorrow and begin a slow healing process for everything in my life. And I hope that through my work I can do the same for others.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And I have a couple of questions for you as well. After what really just felt like 10 years all mashed into one of 2020, a silver lining that was that it really opened a lot of people's eyes to like and forced us to confront not only like where we are now, but how we got there. And you mentioned in one of your blog posts that after one of your birthdays, you really committed to unapologetically owning your authentic narrative. And I was just wondering, like, can you tell us what does that look like in your artistic practice, and how does it like differ from what you did previously?
So that's I'm still exploring that. But looking back to my early work, I was using art as a way to explore my own identity. I was born in Mazatlan, Mexico, and I moved to Seattle when I was 13 years old. My mother did everything she could to provide me with as many opportunities as possible in order for me to assimilate to my new life. I think it was her way of making sure that I didn't suffer the way she did. Unfortunately, as I got older, I found myself caught up between two cultures and not fully being welcomed by neither. It's like I wasn't from here, I wasn't from there. I was just stuck in the middle. So I spent most, if not all of my 20s trying to figure out who I am, while finding my way back to community. And photography allowed me to do that. Lately, though, I have been working in a series of mixed media studies that are very different from what I've done in the past. Just like everybody else, right? 2020 gave us a lot to think about. And for me, it forced me to confront a lot of my own pain and insecurities that I've been carrying with me for a long time, and even have affected my own mental health. So I'm still trying to figure out where I'm going with this new body of work. But one thing I know for sure is that I want to use my own story to normalize the conversation and inspire others who have dealt with or are dealing with depression, suicidal thoughts, and other uncomfortable situations due to the silent battles they're fighting.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I want to encourage everyone to visit us at our CoCA Seattle website, where you can view all of these statements, because I keep referencing them. But you drew a connection between your practice and Waldman's practice, in that it's important to collaborate with your subjects and your surroundings rather than try and speak for them or control the narrative, which I wholeheartedly agree with this approach. And from our conversation between our ED Royal Hourly Barnes and Reiner Waldman Adkins, it was very important. They reiterated the point that it was very important to Waldman that you act as both an observer and a collaborator. And I would just like to hear from you, like, why you think it's an important approach to art and activism to be collaborative with your subjects.
Yeah, so I choose to collaborate with my subjects and my surroundings rather than control them, because, I feel that with this approach, I can create work that is a representation of not only myself, but my environment. I often find myself working on several projects at a time, just like every other artist, and that's because sometimes inspiration is not there. And I found that it's best to just step back, and whatever I'm feeling, going through in the moment, channel that into another project. And sometimes that gives me a whole other idea for what I was working on. So, it's just rather than, I did that in college, where I had to sit down and, get the assignment done, right? And it's kind of being forced to get something done, but it's not there. So kind of going back to creating work that is not really speaking to what I'm feeling or what I want to make a statement. So when it comes to activism, obviously that's, making a statement within some. I often see people get involved with a cause without truly understanding it. I feel that it's a way for them to be part of something while supporting those who are experiencing, the injustice, but don't get me wrong. I think, in my opinion, there is no way to get involved. But I feel that if people, were to do it for more than just the selfie opportunity, and, were to take the time to learn about the experiences of those that they're advocating for, especially if they're not familiar with the experience, because we all have different experiences. And, when I see people going into protests, they feel that the pain they're advocating for is their pain. And that's actually wrong, because we need to honor others. So again, there's no wrong way to get involved. But I feel if people take the time to learn, right, rather than just jumping on a bandwagon, they will organically learn to things about themselves that might surprise them. I know for myself, I like I said, I started going to rallies, and definitely a lot of them in 2016, when the presidential shit show happened. And, I definitely found myself more engaged. I grew up, going to, which I didn't know that's what it was. When I was a kid in Mexico with my grandma, I used to go to political demonstrations. And to me, that was normal. To me, I thought that everybody did that, right? So as now that I find myself being an adult, I think that I encourage everyone to get involved, but definitely do it for more than just the selfie opportunity, and really truly understand, what they're advocating for.
Gotcha. Thank you. And if I may, it sounds like when you use this approach, you get a deeper and richer experience with whomever you're engaging with, as opposed to like the surface selfie level understanding of whatever the issue may or may not be. But we have now moved into the group question portion of the evening, which I will just, ask some questions, and anyone has and the opportunity to respond. So first question would be, how do you think that your work relates to the work that was paired with it from Selma Waldman? Jennifer and Mikhail, you, both of your works were paired with the Thin Naked Line, and Ellen, yours was paired with the Bread of Man, those two, charcoal and then the rose tinted image. But I was just wondering if anyone had any thoughts they would like to share.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the Thin Naked Line and foreign investment both expose oppressors in different ways. I think Waldman's piece it shows these imposing figures, you know, with their shields and their helmets and, you know, their riot gear, and they're very imposing and very threatening, you know, but then, you know, they're also naked from the waist down, which shows them as, you know, who they really are. They're these vulnerable men, you know, and it's sort of a facade. I think my piece exposes oppressors as these anonymous or even like generic businessmen, and they use violence to manipulate conditions to be more favorable for their businesses. And I think that's kind of the human aspect of that, and I think that's where those two are aligned.
Good job. Thank you. Anybody else want to share on this one?
I can follow up since we're paired with the same painting. So to me, the Thin Naked Line reflects on the archetypal gestures of combat. You know, it depicts a group of obviously soldiers dressed in riot gear and armed with, you know, shields, ready to go into town and fight, you know, fight for what they believe in, you know. And when I compare that to my own piece, you know, the Stolen Sisters, I see how my piece reflects on how the community comes together to stand up against police brutality towards Indigenous women. You know, they are using their own voice to demand justice for someone whose life was taken away by the police officers who were supposed to protect her. You know, Renee Davis, as you guys know, is one of the many people who have been killed in this country by police, and, you know, who clearly seem to treat people differently based on how they look, you know. And I feel that right now more than ever, it's important for us to take a step back, you know, and really look at the work that was done in the past, you know, by, you know, Selman, right? And, you know, even now how people say that you know, we advance, things have changed, but in reality, things haven't changed that much, right? So we're still advocating for the same issues. If anything, things have, you know, are getting a lot more difficult for everyone. So that's kind of how I find that connection.
Mm-hmm. And to both of your points, foreign investment seems to expose some of the ways that corporate oppressors are a little bit more insidious than, like, you don't generally see them, like you see them in business suits. You wouldn't necessarily be able to pick the head of a Fortune 500 company or whatever off the street, but they are able to do a lot of damage to the environment, to the communities in which their plants or whatever are working in. And to your point, Jennifer, you know, things may have progressed a little bit, but maybe not as far as we think that they have. And while we see, you know, we don't see as many lynchings in the street, that hasn't gone away. You still see that it does happen. So our next question is that Waldman's art was unflinching, graphic. Some would even call it pornographic, and often centered around themes, as we've discussed, of violence and the relationship between the oppressor and the oppressed. And unfortunately, because of this, while her work was generally accepted internationally, she had a fairly hard time exhibiting her work in the Seattle arts community. And I was just wondering if any of you have ever experienced resistance to your art because of either, you know, the content, the aesthetic, what you chose to focus on in your own artistic practice.
Yeah, sure. I can answer that. My solo exhibition, Dollar Cinema, was also borderline pornographic. In fact, I did actually use some vintage, you know, porno magazines for some of the parts of that, because, you know, the nature of the films that I was trying to represent. You know, the gallery was very accommodating and very accepting, and I feel that, you know, a lot of people in kind of the contemporary art, you know, circle were pretty well receiving of that. But I did, you know, observe some reactions of people that were you know, a bit less approving of it. You know, Rainer mentioned, you know, in relation to Waldman's work, people kind of doing the dance, you know, and they see it and kind of the uncomfortable feelings that some people may be having with some of those things. I witnessed that. Anecdotally, one of the pieces from Dollar Cinema I brought to Wenatchee for that group show, and I did observe a reaction of a small child to it, and it made her cry. She was on the shoulders of her father, and I saw them kind of standing by it, and I saw her kind of smiling, and I saw her turn to it, and then that face just changed, and she started crying, and I was actually standing next to the gallery owner, and I said, "Oh my gosh, but it just made that little girl cry. I feel bad about that." And he said, "Oh no, it was probably the band. I think it was kind of loud." And I was like, "No, it was definitely that." He said, "Yeah, it was. I saw it too." But yeah, it just goes to the work like that you make for something that you think is important, and it might not necessarily be aesthetically pleasing, but it's there.
Gotcha. Thank you. Ellen, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to interject. I'm not from the Seattle area. I'm from the Chicago and New York areas growing up. And I'm not at all surprised that Selma's work did not find a good home here, because I personally have found that Seattleites seem like they get very uncomfortable with things that challenge their assumptions and challenge their viewpoints. I have found that I personally feel like Seattle loves to talk a liberal game, but I'm not really sure that they walk the liberal walk. And I've found that they just, I think really, really strong work that has to do with social issues is going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make you challenge your assumptions. And again, I just found that here people struggle with that, I think.
Well, that's a very valid call out. So thank you, Ellen.
Yeah, I will say that I mean, not so much lately, but definitely when I was 10 years ago, when I was younger too, right? I had two things going against me, that I was 20. So they're like, yeah, just keep, go to a coffee shop and show stuff. And, it was very discouraging. But it wasn't until I met actually my first mentor ever, who, helped me navigate, everything from for culture, CoCA, and all this, like, the artist community, right? That I actually found, I felt empowered to create work, that was actually a representation of me. But even then, though, I was actually, rejected from some galleries who, to them, some of my work, that at the time I did a series called Mazatlan Through My Eyes, which is pretty much, it was me going back to Mazatlan to kind of understand the lifestyle, because again, I only lived there until I was 13. Live here for another part of my life, and people kind of expected for me to give them answers about things that I never experienced, right? So to me, it was like a really powerful, series, and I was super excited about it. But galleries turned me away because to them, it wouldn't sell, and it will only speak to people of Mexican heritage. And I was even told to, just if I could find photos, that were more aesthetically pleasing, that photos that, they could actually sell more. And again, it was discouraging to the point that there's a lot of artwork that I made in the last few years that I haven't shown to people, because it wasn't welcome, and I do feel that in the last few years, things are getting a little better. But yeah, Seattle, talks a big talk, but we don't always, walk the walk.
Can I say one more thing? I think Jennifer had a really strong point that most commercial galleries, they're in business to sell artwork, and challenging artwork isn't always easy to sell. I mean, I know there's certain pieces I've made that I've thought there's no way in hell anyone's ever going to buy this. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it's not the kind of thing you necessarily want up on your wall, but I think it's an important thing to see. So what I was just thinking is, thank goodness for galleries like CoCA, whose aim is not just about, making sure that they can sell as many pieces as they can, because I think I would love to see more opportunities for artists to, whether it's, like the Shun Pike has a Seattle storefronts program where you can have work there and the people can just walk by it, which is even better in my opinion, because you don't have to get them into the gallery. They might be just walking by on their way to work. But I think I would love to see more opportunities for this kind of work, because it is a tough sell in a commercial gallery, but it's really important for us as human beings to see it.
Gotcha. Thank you. And I love the little highlight where there's a difference between galleries that have a sales model and presenting organizations like CoCA, where we are, we'd like to sell art. That's definitely a bonus and a plus, but that is not our main goal. So we do have a lot more opportunity to just show what we would like, show what we think people would be interested in, and great conversation starters, which a lot of these pieces are. All right, so we're running a little bit short on time, so we have time for one more question. So I would just like to ask the group, what do you think that viewers, audiences can do to broaden their artistic viewership and diversify the types of art and artists that they view and support? Because I've found that a lot of the time people kind of get set in, they like this kind of thing, and this is the kind of art that they seek out and they support, but in order to create better equity, we do need to broaden our general tastes and what we seek out.
I think in during this pandemic, I think that's even more important right now because like I mentioned earlier, the opportunities to show work is limited. With a lot of closures, even even coffee shops, which were a great venue for people to show maybe not this less powerful work, but a vessel, a vehicle for people to show their work. It's not really, it's not available right now. So yeah, I think it's definitely important for people to broaden their horizons and show a little bit of support outside of their usual focus.
Okay.
Yeah, I will think that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to turn it around. I guess I kind of take exception with the fact that we need to educate art people, as maybe we just need to get art out in ways that attract people as opposed to having them educated. I think there's already kind of a feeling in the non-art world that art is kind of this, we've all heard people say, I don't know it, I just know what I like. You know what I mean? And there's a sense that they're intimidated, I think, by galleries and museums and stuff sometimes. And so I question whether we need to educate them or we need to embrace them as opposed to educate them. We need to create venues for them to be a part of it and to be more accessible or just out in public a little more. So I don't know if that's kind of turning the question around, but
I mean, I'll turn it around a little more. I think to me, it's not, it goes beyond the viewer. I think it's up to the artist community, to the galleries, to actually, they're the ones that need to be held responsible, to actually highlight artists that are different from the ones that they've been highlighting for the last, I don't know, years, that things haven't changed, right? So again, it's the viewer, we're human beings, we're gonna consume, what's in front of us, especially now that the average person's, myself included, our attention span is like super short, right? With everything going on. So it's really important that galleries, do put themselves in an uncomfortable position, to, really go over highlighting the work of just a very diverse and be more inclusive with who they're highlighting, rather than just focusing on the the bottom line of how much they want to make. And I understand that it's a very difficult choice to make, because galleries need to have their doors open, especially now more in the pandemic. But at the same time, though, it's especially in Seattle, I have seen that not a lot of galleries are opening to welcome artists that don't fit their mission, right? And I think that's great, but missions can be adjusted, and I think with the way that the world is going, it's time for some galleries in the area to really readjust their mission, and really bring everyone, because Seattle has changed so much, not just in the last 10, 20 years, but in the last 5 years. There's like a whole group of people that, I think me personally, 1 in 5 or maybe 10 people that I know, they're not from Seattle, right? So galleries need to start adapting to highlighting, by showcasing work that is from people that are not just from the area, or they just don't have this one style.
Just the other thing is too, that you read so many articles that even galleries are having a hard time getting people to come into them. That I know when I've gallery sat in some places, I'm pretty lonely. So maybe it also is up to us as artists to try and figure out other ways to get our art out there again, whether it's more within the public or whatever it is, to not just depend on this gallery model that already seems like it's struggling to get people to come in the doors.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and especially since unfortunately, based on the history, the gallery model is inherently kind of problematic, to Jennifer, to your point, where it's like they kind of pick what they like to see, the types of people they like to see, and they run with it because it's sellable, but to the detriment of new people to the area or people who make artwork that's not considered, let us call it, sellable. But we are almost at time, so we have entered the what I like to call the shameless plug part of the talk. So I'm going to go first. I want to encourage everyone to visit us on Instagram, Facebook, our website. On our website, you can find a 360 tour of the gallery where you can see all of the pieces that we've talked about tonight, see where they are in relation to both other participating artists and Selma Waldman's pieces. You can also read all of the statements that were provided and that I've been referencing all night, and get some, information about Selma as her statement as well. I would like to encourage all of our participants to let us know what is your website and what is the best way to find you in case anyone's interested in looking you up after this. I'll pick someone if no one wants to go first.
I'll go. So you can actually, I just redesigned my portfolio. I used 2020 to do that. So JenniferAMolina.com. That is my, the one that I'm using now for my address. I do have new work in there, so I will be uploading stuff for sale later this year. So definitely, like I said, take a look at it. And I'm always open to have a conversation with people about, what kind of art, they want to see too, though, because one of my things that I want to do is connect people not just to my art, but to the art of others.
Gotcha. Right.
Okay. EllenHochberg.com.
We got you up and running. That's good. All right.
EllenHochberg.com. And I just built a brand new website. So it's got all my good work on it. So please come visit me.
Thank you.
And connect with me if you'd like. I'd love to hear from everybody.
Right. Last but not least.
Oh, yeah. You can Google my name, but my website is keysgoclick.com. It's also my handle everywhere on Instagram, on Facebook, etc. So, pretty easy to find.
Gotcha. Wonderful. We love continuity across multiple platforms, make it really easy. But I would like to also say a very enthusiastic and heartfelt thank you to all of our participants and our audience who was able to join us here tonight. This event will be uploaded to our YouTube page. So if you have friends or anything like that who weren't able to make it and would like to see it, it will be available there. But I will just finish off with saying thank you and good night. I hope everyone has a nice rest of their weekend. And
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's nice
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.